first I want to tell you guys, thank you so much for all of the support. And we've gotten like loads of lovely notes from people. It has meant everything to us. We are all good here. As a matter of fact, I have Brittany here and Brooke, and I want them to come and be socially incorrect for a second and wave at you guys, because without them, you guys wouldn't have your stuff. So wave, ladies. They have done an incredible job. Brittany is our warehouse manager and so much more. But Brittany touches all your stuff. So she's like super hygienic. Brooke has been helping with all these crazy things and doing some warehouse stuff too, because you guys have kept us busy and we are so thankful for that. We hope that you are taking whatever you're getting and making beautiful things from it and keeping your hands busy and your souls fed. So, but anyway, I'll let them go. They wanted to say hello and goodbye, Brittany. And Brooke's going to be here to read questions from you guys. But I'm excited because, like I said last week, these sew-alongs that we started, we had them in the can. And when all of this took place, we were excited to be able to start rolling them out. And that is thank you to Christina Johnson, who's super amazing. So I announced to you a few days ago that our next sew-along is a petticoat. So we're working towards putting together a whole 18th century kit. And the petticoat we thought would be another good one for you. This is again something that can be for beginners or people who just want to hone their skills, or just because you need a project. So it's a couple of yards of fabric, a little bit of tape, and you can have some good sewing time. I thought I'd talk to you guys today before we roll everything out next Wednesday. If some of you, well, I know some of you have because we've sent it out. Some of you have gone to our link that we put on our website. And we didn't want to do a kit per se like we did with the pockets because there's so many choices for petticoats. There's so many different fabrics. And you'll note if you went to that link that we didn't even include things like silk, because we wanted to just keep it a plain, simple petticoat that you could use, you know, for your beginner's kit or just when you got to go to camp. So if you went to that site, you would see that we had this huge list of fabrics. In fact, I have them all laying out here, some in the back, of fabrics that we felt were appropriate for making a petticoat. The majority of them are light, or they might go to slightly medium weight, but they're all very appropriate, and I was going to talk to you a little bit about them, and also, most importantly, answer your questions if you have questions. A lot of people have become interested in making garments out of wool, and it's incredibly common to make your clothes out of wool, especially prior to the Revolutionary War. We're still getting all of our textiles from England via other places, but through England. And wool, of course, is our main industry. So they're going to push the wool, and we're used to wool because a lot of us are coming from England or Scotland or Ireland. And we are used to wearing wool because of the production there and also the climate. So we're getting a lot of wool here. However, we have different climate, and so other things come into play. You find us buying more in the way of linens, and so you can't see me, but more in the way of linens. And you can also find us buying more in the way of cottons, which we can talk a little bit about at the end, and blends such as cotton and linen, which is incredibly common and you see later in the 18th century. So with the wools, I put a selection out for you guys. A lot of them are just what we call wool stuffs. It was a common, here's one right here. It was a common, common term for a variety of worsteds that were being made in Norwich and later in York. It was a tightly spun yarn. It had a very smooth finish. It could be made in these lighter wools so that it draped readily. It could be worn more seasonally. You could wear it year round, really. And these were really popular. From a modern standpoint, they were also popular because, yeah, they don't wrinkle, and it's great. So, and oh, before I go further, I wanted to say, for those of you that are going, man, I just lost my job, I have no money, stash bust. Everything is great. We were so excited about the pockets that we saw. I mean, we saw some HA, if you want to call it that, pockets, and we saw a wide variety of just, it's all about me pockets. People embroidered their pockets. They made pockets out of flamingo fabric. They made pockets out of heart fabric. They did whatever made their hearts happy, and that's what we want you to do with this project as well. So if you've got some fabulous, like, cartoon fabric you want to use, man, go for it. Make a petticoat, wear it, do some history bounding, have a good time with it. So back to stuffs. You got questions?
Yeah, I have questions when you're...
Okay, yeah. So I will answer questions because I don't want to keep talking anyway.
Lisa Neal is asking if there are guidelines for fabric to match a gown. Would a person wear a linen petticoat with a silk gown and vice versa?
You know, this is one of those kind of gray areas, and you kind of have to go to places like primary writing that could be in diary form, that kind of thing. But typically, sort of rule of thumb, if you're wearing a silk gown, most likely you're going to be wearing either a silk petticoat or possibly some type of a blend. When it comes to wools, and you might wear a wool petticoat, that's true, you might, because you do see some quilted wool petticoats. So there is a chance you might wear that with silk because silk is warm and wool is warm. But one thing that I know some people ask me, and I'll answer it right now, is that we don't wear typically a printed petticoat with a plain gown. Vice versa, all good. But a printed petticoat is not something that I've seen with a plain gown. That good answer? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Not yet.
Nope, not
People
yet.
are just saying hi, waving.
Hello to everybody. And I'm really glad you guys are here. So I was talking about stuffs. So I have a whole bunch. This is a stuff. This is a stuff. These are stuffs. And basically, like I said, it was a general term. So you could really call any worsted a stuff. But it then had other names. So some of those other names, and you'll find those on our website. But for example, this, which I call, and if you'll notice in all of our fabrics, we put our name, our primary name, into parentheses. And the reason we do that, or quotation marks, not parentheses, quotation marks. And the reason we do that is because these are modern manufacture. These are textiles that I feel really comfortable with calling them by that name based on primary research that we've done, looking at the fabrics, touching the fabrics, and then finding these modern manufacture, but they're not camlets of the 18th century. We can't find the exact replica of those. So therefore, the little quotation marks. But this camlet is the one that you'll see when we start our video next Wednesday, when the video premieres. You will see it because that's what we made our petticoat out of. So, whoa, this is to fit me, so it's like big. Okay. So here's the petticoat that we did for the sew along, and it is made of the camlet. And the camlet it's made of wool, but what you find with camlets is they had a very smooth appearance. They were somewhat crisp, and oftentimes they were mixed with things like silk. This one has no silk in it, but it gives that illusion by the aesthetics of the fabric. And so this was real fun to sew with, and will make a beautiful petticoat. Matter of fact, it's my petticoat for one of my work gowns. So camlet was one of the terms that you see. Some of the other terms might have been flannel. I know a lot of you asked for flannel. You see flannel in primary documentation. We have a couple of flannels. I've looked at a fair amount of flannel in collections. It tends to be a woolen, not a worsted. It's soft, and it's a loose spun yarn that tends to get lofty. So it's not tightly woven. So it has loft to it. It's spongy, but it's warm. So some of the flannels that we've got here are these mixed flannels, like this one here and this one here. And they're more of a medium weight. So this is something that you probably would be happier with as a fall or a winter type of a petticoat versus a summer petticoat, although you could wear it. You know, wool tends to be a fiber that wicks away, and it isn't necessarily that hot. Not as hot as some of the synthetics that are out there today, I'll grant you that. This one is considered a medley or mixed cloth, and these are because they would take the yarns. Sometimes they would either mix yarns, or they would mix they would dye the fleece before it was spun and put different dyes together, different fleeces together to spin. But they produce these heathered wools that had various colors in them. And this is something that I found a huge amount of in various collections, and it was done in, I saw some in the finer worsteds, but mostly they showed up in the coarser wools or the broadcloths. So that's another one. Cantaloupe, yes ma'am.
We've got a few questions
Sure.
that I want to catch up on, if that's okay. Just
Yep.
to take a pause. The first question is about the number of petticoats someone might wear.
Okay, so you most likely are going to wear a couple of petticoats. You're going to wear some type of an under petticoat and then a fashion petticoat. You can wear up to 3 petticoats, depending. But typically you're going to wear a couple of petticoats because your under petticoat is really more part of your underwear. And those typically were made of lighter fabric. In the winter you see some out of flannels, but during the warmer weather you're going to see them out of linen or dimities, which were made out of cotton as we get later in the century, but earlier in the century are part of the Manchester groups, which means they've got a linen warp yarn and a cotton weft yarn. So they are underwear. They're not something meant to be seen.
All right. Another one is, I think you talked a little bit about this, but there's a question about whether you should have your petticoat matching your gown. Mm-hmm. And if not, can you do striped petticoat with the printed top?
Nobody used to say you can't. And you can probably find some great mezzotins or hawkers or something like that out there, some prints out there that show a combination of different patterns being worn together. Certainly there are some ethnic prints out there that are primary that show patterns being worn together, and Dutch comes to mind right away. There's no rule of thumb per se. The only one that I can't speak to is the idea of the printed petticoat with the solid gown. However, I've seen striped petticoats with a solid gown, vice versa. If you're wearing a jacket, I've seen chintz jackets and striped petticoats together. So you get a wide variety. And I always tell people that, when in doubt, go find something to document it with. Go look for a piece of art or a print or a primary source, something in writing that describes. Old Bailey's great for that, gives good descriptions. Runaways give good descriptions, so.
When you're talking about the winter petticoat, someone asked if you could line a winter petticoat for extra warmth.
I don't know that I've seen line petticoats. Quilting is usually the rule of thumb when it comes to a warm petticoat. They're going to be either quilting silk, which is what survives mostly in collections, but there's also wool that survives, glazed wool. And so typically you're seeing quilting, not just lining per se.
We do have a very important question. If they order fabric today,
Yes.
will they get it in time to start the tutorial Wednesday?
Hey Jim, have they picked up yet? They haven't picked up yet, but I don't know how far behind Mr. Burnley is. He says he's almost caught up. So go run to your computer, press the button, and you'll definitely have it. It rolls out on Wednesday morning, and we'll be talking about it next Friday. So you can even start a little late and still have fun on Friday with us when we start sewing.
All right. There's some construction questions, but I think we can answer those in a few minutes.
Okay.
There was one question back when you were talking about blends. They're asking about a silk blend. Like, what would a silk be blended with?
Silk was blended with cotton. You get cherry dairies, which were a beautiful textile. Some were really coarse, as a matter of fact, because they were being made in India, and I'm not really sure what the specifications were, but I've seen cherry dairy good and not so good, aesthetically. They could be blended with cotton. They were definitely, you see silk and wool all the time. So let's see, cotton, wool. Don't think I've ever seen silk and linen. Can't speak to that. I'd have to go back and look at my research to speak to that one. Okay.
All right. We'll get some more questions in a few minutes, but
Okay.
You were heading towards the cantaloon and the stuff.
Yeah, I was. So I had talked about a few of the term stuff, which you see on our website all the time. Camlet, which you see, and the other was cantaloon, which we've had some of that Brooke is, I think, already gotten.
I've already bought some for a gown.
Yeah,
but
she
there's
has.
lots left.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This is also mixed, so it's got several different colors in it. But cantaloon was basically a lower class camlet. It was a little bit softer. It was wool. It was a worsted, but it was not as fine as the camlets were in weave and texture, but it still made for a very nice garment. And so this is lovely. I actually have a cantaloon gown from many years ago in rust that I still wear. So pantaloons. So that kind of covers the wools. I do want to speak to these wools here. So we have all these twilled and plain woven stuffs. All of them are great. They're all lightweight. They all drape nicely. These flannels are going to be a little bit heavier, but still will make up nicely for a warm winter petticoat. This is almost as light as the stuffs, maybe a tiny bit heavier, the cantaloon. And then we've got a couple of stripes in here. This one, you're going to see me stitching on because I need a new petticoat desperately. And I had a beautiful striped petticoat from many years ago that I have patched so many times that it's disgusting. But it's my favorite, and this is a lot like it. So this is one that it does have a looser weave to it, so you have to be a little cognizant of that. It is a little bit heavier than the stuffs, but it'll make a good petticoat. The other one is this one, which has been really popular with you guys, this stripe, and for two reasons. It looks blue or burgundy. You can really use both sides of this. Now this is definitely a medium weight. When I got this, I thought tailoring. I think that it's best suited. I've had a lot of people buying it for Edwardian and things like that. I think it's best suited for that. But if you were looking for a petticoat that had some body to it, this might be a good choice. If you're on the fence, it's well worth it to give us a call and ask if we can stick a sample in the mail to you. So that kind of covers the wools that I had in mind.
Here, can you put that towards the front of the table? Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a pretty color.
Yeah. That kind of covers the wools that I had in mind. And if you guys are looking on the list and you see a particular one and you want me to talk about it or speak to it, I'm happy to do it. You just have to give me the style number. Because guess who put all the style numbers on here for me? Brooke, because she's amazing. All right.
Before moving on to linen, can you address about the sewing silk? Someone said they really like sewing with silk. And what fabrics of these or in general can they sew with silk?
Okay. You don't find silk on linen. You do find silk on wool. So you do find construction being done using silk. You can also construct it with linen. You see both. Silk, and of course you can do silk on silk. This is our quilting weight silk, and you can find it on the website. It is lighter than our buttonhole twist. You don't want to stitch with buttonhole twist. That's really meant for buttonholes and eyelets. But this is actually pretty much the weight of the silk that we've seen a lot in construction. It's heavier than your standard, like sewing silk. Although some of you may be more comfortable with modern sewing silk, like the spools that we carry, that's fine. But if you want to try working with one of these, go for it.
All right.
So are we good?
Sure. Go on to the linens, and then I have some general questions.
Okay. So I have a big group of linens here, and I have a lot in just really drab colors. So for starters, some of these just well, not that, but all these browns. We got lots of brown in stock right now. If you guys like brown, we got a lot. But you see a lot of linens that are in these neutral tones. We have a yellow here, but it's a very pale yellow. I know people ask about dyeing linen all the time, and how I can speak to this is the fact that there are so many receipts out there, recipes for those that don't know what a receipt is. There are so many receipts out there for dyeing linen, and there's big debates, but I have found primary documentation as an example of talking about purple linen, right? So based on all of the textiles that I've looked at, the purple that I chose is a color tone that you would have gotten in the 18th century. What you will notice here is, for the most part, a lot of these, other than the browns, which you can get pretty dark, are not that dark, other than indigo. And indigo is a dye that was incredibly popular. We were exporting indigo to England, in a huge way, and it was something that you see a lot of it in collections. When I did work on the foundlings, there was a huge amount of indigo, and one of the things, Mark Hutter, as an example, mentioned that using indigo in the dye meant that you could wash it hot and you wouldn't lose it because it wasn't fugitive. So like this green eventually would be fugitive. The pink would be fugitive. The yellow would be fugitive, but not these blues. They would maintain their color. So that makes them very popular. If you get into the solid, not the solids, we talk solids. You get into the stripes, you see all kinds of weaves. Somebody mentioned the idea, well, you can't have that because it's not balanced. Well, yes, you can, because I have primary documentation of stripes that are unbalanced and balanced. So you see both kinds. This is a ticking stripe. Now, we looked at a collection that had a bunch of ticking in it from Germany, it was last quarter, 18th century, and the tickings that were specifically listed as being for clothing or shoes were these fine woven twill, not twill, herringbone woven or twill woven linens. And they were specifically made for that industry. This one is almost directly, it's almost identical to an original that we have in our research. Something like this, you might ask, well, all those colors, I don't know. Well, yeah, this is 100% linen. However, why are you laughing? There's obviously somebody saying something really funny, and I don't know because Brooke gets to read it and I don't.
I'll tell you in a moment.
Okay. So anyway, this one with all the colors would actually have been in the 18th century, probably a Manchester. So some of those colors would have been a cotton yarn that would have been introduced to create all the colors. So now tell me.
Twilight Fortune says, I love when she says she has primary documentation because it's like she's saying, stay in your lane.
Oh, well, no, I'm not challenging, but I want you to know that I've done the research. I'm not just saying, oh, do this because I said so. I want you to know that I'm doing my due diligence when I show you things, that it comes from thought and a process, not just from, oh, that's pretty, I'm going to do that. Because that's where our company, that's how our company was based. And by saying that, I'm also saying, when I said to you guys, do your stash busting or make your pink flamingo petticoat, this is for fun. You don't have to do a HA petticoat. I'm going to tell you the HA because that's where we come from, but it's not a requirement. We want you to have fun with it. We want you to have a good time and get some hand sewing done.
There definitely is appreciation by some people that you do your research, librarians especially.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Just a clarification, when you said fugitive earlier, does that mean fading?
Yes.
Okay.
That eventually the dye goes away. Right.
Okay. What of these fabrics would be the best choice for beginners?
I would say some of the plain linens, the stripes might be a little difficult no, I take that back. The stripes you might, unless you have a problem with things lining up and stuff, stripes might be helpful because we're going to be doing pleating, okay? So you could keep your pleating straight by using the stripes. So somebody's trying to call me. Can't talk now. Anyway, the stripes might be good, or some of the plain linens, but really almost anything. The lightweight stuffs are just a dream to sew with. So all of these are fairly easy to work with. The flannels might be a little more difficult.
Get the sage. Can you bring out the sage?
Yeah, that's one.
This is lovely.
Beautiful. This is
just love that fabric.
Really pretty.
Also the red.
Yeah,
we have this. It's a red medium weight stuff.
Yep.
And that's just super easy to handle.
Yep. This one is twill woven, so you have to be a little cognizant that you're going to get a little bit of stretch in it. So you just need to make sure you baste and pin and do all the good things that you're supposed to do. But the red is lovely and very appropriate. You see a lot of red. All of the colors that we have here are fine. You can't go wrong with any of these colors. We also have, this is so pretty. This light blue is just, we have a hard time sometimes getting the colors good on the internet, but this light blue is really beautiful. And would make a lovely, not only a petticoat, but a gown, all kinds of things, so.
All right, we have some good questions here that are general. Questions about whether stuff and stripes could be worn by upper classes. And also, what is the variation by region?
Okay.
And by decade.
So, wow.
It's not all the same. It's not all the same question.
Okay. In my book, we'll talk about, no. Okay, just general answers. As far as, what was the first one? It was about the wool.
Yeah, the stuff and stripes. Do you see those in upper class, for the upper class?
Yeah, you're going to find stuffs. Now, what they may choose for, like, if I was, let's say, merchant class or higher, if I were just making a very plain gown that I wanted to wear, I might choose a nice camlet versus a plainer stuff, for example. But all of these stuffs tend to be finer. The flannel would be a little bit coarser, and maybe a little more low class in that regard. And so what was the other?
And region.
Region, wow. You know, you really, there's a logic to this. So region wise, if you think about the fact that we're being basically, we have a lot of folks that are coming from England or that region, right? And so they're used to wearing a certain type of textile, certain types of fashion. It makes it a little more difficult to say regionally who's doing what. Now, there's been a lot of research being done here, if we're talking about here, in the colonies, now the United States. There have been some research done of the southern colonies versus the northern colonies and what type of textiles tend to be popular. One of the things that you see occurring pretty regularly in the northern colonies is a Linsey-Woolsey, which is linen and wool blended together. Or not blended together, but woven together. It's two different yarns. So you see a lot of that. Here in the southern colonies, here in Williamsburg in particular, you start seeing a lot of cotton. You see a huge amount of Manchesters, which is the linen and cotton being produced in England. It's cheaper than the all cotton goods coming from India, but you're able to get prints. And this starts as early as the 1750s that you're seeing that. So,
how about if someone lives down in Florida? What's the coolest fabric for them? And it needs to be washable because there's lots of sand at their events.
Linen. Linen would be great because it's cool and it is washable. If you go to our website, if you go up to the top bar, there is one button you can press that talks about care of your fabric, and it'll give you a whole deal on how you should wash your linen, et cetera, et cetera. So,
speaking of linen, Persis is asking where linen comes from and who makes the best linen, like the softest. I'm not sure if this is today or in the past.
So where does linen come from? It comes from all over now in modern terms. A lot of linen was coming from Ireland in the 18th century into England and then filtering over to us. There was not linen manufactured per se here. What was being done was small. It was cottage industry. It was self-need. It was not commercial as it was in England per se. You find linen being manufactured in Scotland. Germany is making linen. So there's several countries that are producing linen in the 18th century. Now you find linen being produced. China is a huge producer of linen textiles now, and they very much range in quality. Unfortunately, one of the things you mentioned, soft, and one of the reasons that you may go into your Joann's or what have you, and look at linen and you pick it up and it's got like this really soft texture to it, is because they've taken the fiber and they've chopped it up before they've spun it. And what that does is make the linen wear out faster. So in reality, if you want a good linen, you want a linen that has a crispness to it, not a softness. It will soften with wear and with washing. So be patient.
In regards to fabric choice by decade, do you find that the fabrics change from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s in regards to petticoats and, of course, gowns?
Yes, that Jim's phone. Sorry, guys. You do find some changes. All right, so we have pre-revolution where we have England being our filter. They're basically providing all of our textiles and we're reliant on them. Then you have revolutionary time where we're not getting fabric and it's difficult to get fabric at times, and we're trying our own cottage industry fabric and it's not very successful, but we're doing it. And then as soon as the war is over, we're like, woohoo, we're going to talk to England again. But then we've also developed some direct ways of getting textiles to ourselves through the Caribbean, etc. So we are getting more cottons. We are still getting wool from England. We don't stop getting it, but we're definitely getting more cotton, and our linens are coming in as they were, but not through England. So we're dealing directly with Ireland, for example, Germany, etc.
Speaking of cotton, Megan would like to know when we'll see a new printed cotton come into the inventory. I ask her this question every week.
Truthfully, there's like 2 or 3 cottons that I want to print from the DAR, and we sort of had a hiccup here. I can't go there and look at things now and get all my final information. I will probably do some work, hopefully, in the next month, and it will be based on textiles and some more handkerchiefs, of course. But the other thing is, too, is that I'd like to know what you guys want and what you're willing to pay for it. Because one of the problems we run into is that we do very small runs of our textiles. So we run 100 meters at a time. So that's 100 meters for the world. And we pay a decent amount of money for it. So with that said, we have to charge a decent amount of money for it. And I know that there are $10 a yard cottons out there. So I don't know. You guys have to tell me. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you're willing to pay, and we'll go from there.
A while back, someone asked about glazed wools and how and if it can be replicated.
So far, nobody has been that successful. Now, there is one person, Kathleen Smith, who runs Thistle Hill Weaving. I believe she's been able to produce a glazed damask. I can't remember. She's done something with glazing, but I'm not positive. It was done through heat and pressure. And I know there's been all kinds of experiments out there, and Mark Hutter, Neil Hurst can speak to that because I know they tried.
Neil's watching right now.
So what do you say, Neil? Didn't you guys try some experiments with glazed wool? Is he answering?
Not yet.
So, to my knowledge, no, not right now.
Are the French in what becomes the Northwest Territory wearing similar textiles?
Okay, yes and no. I'm sure the French have certain, and I have not, and I'm going to be honest, I've not studied French fashion, or French American, French colonial fashion, put it that way. I've not studied French colonial fashion, and I can't speak a lot to it, but I can tell you that textile-wise, we're all getting the same stuff. So how they choose to wear it, you know, their fashion might change a little bit. It might have certain ethnic characteristics to it, but we're all wearing the same textiles.
Susan Walker says she portrays a colonial woman in northern Michigan, 1740 to 60. And do we know any colors and types of fabric and how far textiles get out into the frontier?
They're out there. There are well-established trade routes as early as the 17th century. So you're getting your textiles. If you're in question, it's best to look for your local area, any type of primary documentation you can find in respects to trade routes and how they're trading. I know that as every year goes by, more and more sites and things are discovering public store records, things that help them to understand what was being traded and what was being found in their areas during different time periods. I would say for your time frame that more wool is being worn. They're not giving up their wool that readily. And of course, you're in the North, so you're pre-Revolutionary War. I would say you'd be wearing a lot of wool. So.
Neil has chimed in about the glazed wool. He said that the person you mentioned has been able to replicate vermicelli patterns and a few others in worsted upholstery.
Okay.
But that you can't iron it.
You can't iron it because you lose it.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I don't know how she's done her replication. And I also don't know that glaze wouldn't go away on, you know, nobody's going to give me an original piece of glazed wool and say, hey, you know, go see what happens when you throw this in the washer. But it could very readily go away as well because we do know that they're using heat and pressure to produce this glazing. And if any of you own any of our beetle linen, our glazed linen, it's similar in the fact that it's being beat, okay, and going through hot steam and water and being beat, which creates this glazing. But if I wash it, it goes away. So I think it's similar in that respect.
Now, the next group of questions have to do more with construction, and not like the detailed construction that will happen next week, but
Right.
wanting to know, you know, are all petticoats pretty much constructed the same? Or are there some tips on how to work on silk taffeta versus wool? What about binding the hem of a wool petticoat? That kind of thing.
Okay. As far as construction is concerned, yes, pretty similar. Sometimes you'll find a little bit more, we're going to be doing a spaced running back stitch for our petticoat. And you might find a little bit finer stitching on a petticoat, but typically time is money in a sense. I mean, fabric is expensive, labor is cheap, but if you're in the business of making clothing, you want to churn that clothing out. So anything that you can do to save time, you're going to do from a manufacturing standpoint. And one of the places where you can save time is in non-stress areas. And the sides of petticoats, the seams, are not stressed. So you don't have to put a lot of teeny tiny stitching in there. So it is pretty similar. As far as binding petticoats, for those of you who did the pocket last week and week before, same type of binding process. And where we have, in fact, Neil can speak to it too, they have a lovely, I can't remember if it's a Linsey or if it's an all wool, Neil, striped petticoat that's bound with wool ferret, which is a wool tape. You see that. You see silk petticoats sometimes backed in silk. You never see them bound like in wool or something like that. And you might find, I don't know that I've ever seen a petticoat that literally had a binding where you saw it in silk. You see the back, but I don't know that you see the binding, maybe a tiny bit of it if you use a silk tape versus textile. But the wool bind with wool, linen, you can bind it with linen. Now, again, I don't have a linen petticoat to give you to say this is how they did it. Now, there may be some under petticoats out there that are bound in linen, not sure. So, but the process is the same as binding your pocket. So, is that all the questions? No more questions?
Neil's saying that bound in silk on most quilted petticoats.
Okay.
But you see very little of it.
Yeah, okay, good. Yep, thank you, Neil.
You haven't talked about the threads or
Right.
the tapes yet.
Right, so I am going to talk about those. Now, again, if you went and looked at our site, again, use our site as a source of information. It doesn't mean you have to go buy things, you don't, but it'll give you the information you need to go pull out of your stash or whatever you intend to do. For the top of your petticoat, we told you that you needed a tape. Well, typically you see these tapes, they're a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. We weren't going to do 1/2 inch because you guys would cry. But 3/4 inch tape. The first one that we have here is linen, and linen is oftentimes what you do see on a petticoat. Sometimes petticoats, you might find cotton on them, but usually that's a later addition. It's not typical. So you see linen. If you just can't stand the fact that it's natural linen and you don't want it on your petticoat, and we're going to show you 2 methods too of putting your binding on. One doesn't show the binding. If you don't want the natural linen, then you can choose as an alternative our white cotton plain weave, or you can bleach this, and we have a process for bleaching it on our YouTube channel. So you can do that.
Right when you said that, Christina commented that you needed to remind folks about whitening linen tape tutorial. You all are in sync.
Now. Anyway. So, and we also have cotton twill tape. So choose your poison. As far as thread, linen can be used on both the linen and the wool. We talked about the silk a little bit. Oh, and a matter of fact, I had Rebecca Olds ask me, she said she struggles with silk thread and it wanting to twist up. What I would suggest, because this is done on a card, what I would suggest is ironing it. You can cut your lengths and iron it, and it does take the kinks out. Or if you're working on wool, it's not going to hurt it to put a little wax on it. Okay? So you could use that. You can use linen thread. Now, they do have colored thread in the 18th century. You see it in store accounts where they're talking about threads that are colored. So yeah, if you want to do it, you can choose to match whatever, but you don't have to. It's perfectly appropriate to use a natural or a bleached linen thread to do your project. So if you've got a big spool of thread that you're multi-purpose, go to, use it. If you don't have linen thread, and again, you're not in a position to get linen thread, use your cotton thread. So, and that's all the notions you're going to need. This is going to be a simple project, you guys. 2 rectangles and a few sewing techniques and a little bit of pleating, and you're going to have a great petticoat to wear. And the biggest part for me is I'm looking forward to seeing everybody get them done and show me model them with your pockets. But your pockets should be on the inside. So then that means you have to take a video of you putting on your pocket, then putting on your petticoat. Does that sound good? That's your job. Okay.
Do we get to see your pockets that you finished?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I put it here. I did finish my pocket. I finished my pocket. My pocket is done. So this was from our kit. And one of the things, I can't remember if we do this in the video, but one of the things you might want to do with your tape at the end is just stitch it off. I think we did stitch it off, but if we didn't, stitch it off. Just turn it and put a couple little stitches in there so that it doesn't start to ravel at any point in time. So I did my pocket. I did my homework because Brooke made me.
Christina says yes, she did do that. In the video.
I didn't remember. Sorry, Christina.
Any final questions? If you have a question, ask it now. Noodle Stitch is asking which classes of folks would have used silk versus linen thread.
I don't think that there's a class distinction in respects to that, because the surviving garments don't tell us who owned them in most cases, right? Unless there's somebody who was wealthy and we get all of that information, session information when we get the garment. But for your everyday folk, we don't have anything that tells us that. But silk thread is being offered in the stores and linen thread is being offered in the stores, so can't answer it.
Do bindings need to match the fabric of the petticoat?
Meaning the top binding? I'm assuming you're talking about the top? No, does not. It's really a personal thing, and you oftentimes just saw linen tape. Oftentimes I found it bleached, but it didn't matter what the textile was.
She was actually asking about the bottom binding.
Okay, so you do see some colors.
Did they need to match?
Not necessarily, no. Again, our modern sensibilities are not 18th century sensibilities. Although they did do some neat things with historic colors, like the pink and green thing when that came in. Those really look nice together and they were very popular. But the sensibility that we have about matching and patterns and things like that wasn't the same.
In regards to sewing on silk fabric, do you almost always used silk thread?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what Neil says. He agrees. What about pinning on silk taffeta? Did the holes stay?
They can stay, yes. So, it might be a good idea to rather than pinning, to baste your seams a little bit in from where you're going to do your final stitching. And that way you won't have any chance of putting holes where you're going to see them.
So Tiny Angry Crafts remembers you mentioning something about a book. I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that, the book that you're writing.
No. It will happen, but this lady needs to retire for that to happen. But meanwhile, I'll have lots to say, and hopefully I'll live long enough to say it. And by the way, I think I saw on social media that you are healthy and that there are no problems, and I'm glad to hear that.
All right. Anything else?
Not for me, other than I'm looking forward to everybody making a petticoat. And I'm looking forward to me making a petticoat out of this because I super duper like it. But I am warning you guys, if you buy this fabric, you can see, I'll do this. You can see that it's a noticeable thread. So you are probably going to want to finish all of your seams, and turn them and hem them or what have you, or fill them down so that you don't have it raveling. And I think, is that it? No more questions. Everybody went home. So folks, I have been so happy to be able to visit with you, if only virtually. I hope you're enjoying sewing. I hope you are staying been talking too much, staying safe, and that you are well. So until next time, bye.